We have three topics for today. The first is the new PLA purge, which comes to light on the eve of PLA Day, a national holiday in China celebrating the military's founding. The second is the 2023 World University Games held in China, and how Xi Jinping uses this opportunity for political messaging. And the third is a new survey from the Pew Research Center, which reveals that China's international reputation has reached a historic low. Miles, how are you?
Very good, Shane. Nice to be with you again.
Wonderful to be with you again. So today is National Holiday in China, PLA Day, or the birthday of the People's Liberation Army. In the background, though, there are some rumors of military purges which have been circulating for a few weeks now. It seems as if a new anti-corruption campaign may be underway. Miles, could you briefly tell us a bit about this holiday, what it looks like in China, and then shed some light on the rumors of military purges?
August 1st is always the PLA Day. Normally celebrated with great fanfare. This year is no exception. The rumors they're swirling all over the place because there appear to be a lot of things going on within the Chinese rocket force, which is their strategic command that handles all these ballistic and conventional weapons, missiles. It turns out, actually, this is not rumors anymore. Less than 48 hours ago, there was a major development confirming all those rumors as true. The incumbent commander of the PLA rocket force, General Li Yuchao, has been relieved. There's no announcement, but there's a new guy because, as I said, less than 48 hours ago, on the eve of the August 1st PLA Day, Xi Jinping showed up at the promotion ceremony promoting two senior officers to the rank of a full general. And the two promotees are PLA Rocket Force's new commander, General Wang Houbin, and PLA Rocket Force's new political commissar, General Xu Xishen. Now, that means the incumbent commander, Li Yuchao, is gone. So he's vanished. He's gone. So this is a really, really big political earthquake within the PLA for two reasons. Number one, and obviously, is the unceremonial removal of Commander Li Yuchao from the top command of China's strategic force. So that's not a rumor. Another thing that's very, very important to note is that there will be another round of a massive purge through the chain of command within the PLA rocket force, because that's a historical pattern. The reason is very simple, because the two new bosses for the PLA rocket force are from outside of rocket force. Neither of these two has a very service background within the rocket force, which was previously known as the 2nd Artillery. Commander Wang, the new commander, is from the Chinese Navy. Political Commissar Xu is from Chinese Air Force. You can imagine their first job will be to purge all those senior officers under the now purged former commander Li Yuchao. So this is history repeats itself. So this is a very, very fascinating stuff to watch.
We've spoken before about how necessary it is for the party to maintain control over the PLA, and from the CCP's perspective, they would like the party and military to fit together like a hand in a glove. But then the consistency of these purges points to a friction between the military and the party. Is this just paranoia on behalf of Xi, or is there real tension within the PLA that he needs to account for?
That's a very good question, because what you just said points to a profound and unsolvable dilemma of PLA modernization, that is, being expert while still being read. Because if you notice that, the officers that have been purged within the Chinese rocket force, all of them are professional officers, renowned for their professional and technical competence. None of them is political commissars. So this is all started with in late April, former PLA rocket force deputy commander, Major General Zhang Zhenzhong, and another deputy commander, Liu Guangbin. They're both arrested, rumored to be arrested, which is very likely to happen. Now, as to PLA rocket force top guy, Commander Li Yuchao, he was rumored to be arrested on June 26th, which nowadays, today, I mean, it looks very, very likely to have happened. Now, on July 6th, just a few weeks ago, the third deputy commander of the rocket force, Major General Wu Guohua, died suddenly at his home. And this is reported. He died. Now, PLA internal narrative is that he died of a brain hemorrhage. But the very interesting thing is, at his funeral, one of his former colleagues read a eulogy that says that he died of suicide. So this is perfectly matched the narrative that his boss, Commander Li Yichao, had been arrested in late June. So a new round of purges is going on. Now, it is all plausible that Xi Jinping wants to purge a few professional officers to say to the military that training and skills are not the most important thing in the PLA, but political loyalty to him and to the communist ideology is. Maybe he thinks that the PLA rocket force does too much of professional development, not enough of ideological correctness. If you know anything about the PLA history, all major military purges in the history of PLA resolved around this issue of how to strike a balance of being read and being expert at the same time. I mean, the purges of Mao's two former defense ministers, Marshal Peng Dehuai in 1950s and Marshal Lin Biao in 1970s, all because of this. And let me just read the one thing that's very interesting. On July 26th, Xi Jinping went around to another theater, which is a Western Theater Command, and he made a very important speech. And in that speech, he stressed the paramount importance of the party commands the gun cardinal principle. And that is, I quote, "We must ensure that the party must control our military through the brains of all soldiers, tightly strengthening our political and organizational grip over the troops. And we must focus our attention on the party secretaries within the top military commands, making top commanders set an example of impeccable standard with the enhanced abilities of political judgment, political alertness, and political implementation." End of quote. I mean, Xi Jinping is a political animal. He's a general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, no more, no less. This is also poses a huge embarrassment for a PRC worldwide. There's no denial. There's no official comment from PRC spokesperson. In fact, each year, the Chinese embassy here in Washington, D.C. throws a huge party to celebrate the PLA Day. This year is no exception, except it will be so embarrassing for the Chinese ambassador, new ambassador to the United States, Mr. Xie Feng, to even show up to face the questions. So he conveniently, on the eve of the embassy's huge party, he injured himself during the bicycle ride, and he basically conveniently excused himself from even showing up for this huge shindig. Now, there have been a lot of speculation about why there is a rocket force shakeup, and some point out to the release of the U.S. Air Force report back in last October. The United States Air Force War College down in Maxwell, Alabama, has a institute called the China Aerospace Studies Institute. They released the report in last October, something like the PLA Rocket Force Organization, in which there is a detailed analysis and identification of the Rocket Force units and the chain of command. And allegedly, this caused a big shock within the Chinese military because how this information was leaked out. Mm-hmm. It's mostly from the open sources, so I mean they're paranoid. My view of this, this may have more to do with Xi Jinping's increased paranoia about professional military officers' loyalty to him than this particular report. Xi Jinping's paranoia has increased exponentially after the Wagner revolt in Russia. So military loyalty to the supreme leader is very, very supreme.
As they're doing these purges, are they doing anything to mitigate the loss of expertise? It seems to me for a country that's ostensibly preparing for war, it's entirely imprudent to sacrifice technical expertise and capability for the sake of loyalty. Do they simply just deal with the consequences of that, or is there something they do to mitigate this?
That's why I say this is a profound and unsolvable problem for the PLA. So if you balance being read and being expert, the Chinese leadership has never bat an eye sacrificing being expert, because political loyalty is very important. If you know how much time the Chinese military throughout the rank spending on each day on political study, loyalty affirmation activities, it's astonishing. That's why one of the fundamental difference between Chinese party army and Western democratic military forces lies in precisely this particular point. That is, Chinese military is a Chinese Communist Party army that places a premium on primacy on political loyalty and ideological correctness rather than professional proficiency and skill sets. If you look at the promotion standards, that's very, very clear. So this is why within the Chinese military, there is this profound and very sharp conflicts. Xi Jinping promoted a lot of political commissars. I can guarantee you there must be a lot of disenchantment and resentment within the professional military ranks.
Switching gears to China's relationship with the international community more broadly. This week, the biennial World University Games is underway in Chengdu, which will run until August 8th. Student athletes from 120 nations are competing over a week and a half in an Olympic-style competition. These games have been suspended for 2 years. The Chengdu Games were supposed to be held in 2021, but postponed due to COVID. And the 2022 Games were planned to take place in Russia, which were suspended due to the invasion of Ukraine. Miles, international games like this are often an opportunity for international outreach and engagement. They allow the host country to draw a spotlight to themselves. And in some cases, like the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing, they can be a source of international controversy. What do you think this particular event at this time tells us about China's international outreach and relationship with the broader international community?
Well, if you ask an average American, average Brit, or average French, I mean, what do you think of the World University Games? And their response will be, what game? People don't pay much attention to this. But in China, it's a huge event because China uses this kind of world sports event to showcase its global leadership, to tell the world there's a new leadership in the world, and that's China. It's a little bit quixotic, right? So, but China takes this very seriously. Xi Jinping went to Chengdu, where the games are hosted, which is southwest part of China, in the Sichuan province. The whole city became a ghost city because there was a severe security measures. Citizens were not allowed to go out. You were not allowed to open your window shades, and there's a severe. This whole city is almost like a Potemkin village of international show, but it's huge. And interestingly, China really liked this kind of stuff for many reasons. Number one is in 2017, the World University Games were held in Taiwan. So China cannot be outdone by Taiwan. They want to make a political statement over there. The opening ceremony is very telling because China clearly mixed politics with sport. In its opening sort of Olympic-like entrance ceremony, which is very eye-catching. When the Chinese team showed up, it's like extravagant, and the audience responded with roaring applause and chanting slogans. When the Chinese Taipei team showed up, the audience chanted unification, unification with the motherland. It's very embarrassing. Now, when the Japanese team, U.S. team, and the South Korean team entered, dead silent. Dead silent. There is no audible response from the audience. And this is really, really sort of chilling in a way. And then some countries were not very happy. India, for example. India sent 8 athletes to this game in Chengdu. 3 of the 8 Indian athletes came from this province, India called the Arunachal Pradesh. China called the South Tibet. That's the area China and India were disputing as to who owns this area. So the Chinese government did not issue a regular visa to the 3 athletes from the Arunachal Pradesh. Instead, they gave them a separate piece of paper totally detached from the passport, trying to make it some kind of sovereign statement. The Indian government is absolutely upset about this whole thing. So this kind of a small thing that really damaged China's international reputation, and China issued a whole bunch of invitation to world leaders to show up at this Chengdu World University Games. Very few showed up. A couple of deputy prime minister from Central Asia, and there is the leader from Indonesia, and that's it, right? About this time, some of China's newly diplomatic gains even refused to be associated with China. One of the very interesting phenomenon was the prime minister of Solomon Islands was supposed to go to China, and he realized China is such a rogue country with such a bad reputation. But then he had to go to China at some point. So he just almost certain a fake injury. He said, I was injured, and showed up the shirt with clearly fake blood. And he showed up on TV, said, no, I'm sorry, I couldn't go to China anymore. This is on eve, the day before he was supposed to depart for China. And you can see this kind of Chinese reputational damage is of China's own doing. I mean, last week, it was the anniversary of the truce agreement in the Korean Peninsula. And Kim Jong-un held a huge hoopla celebrating this. And he invited many countries to go, but only 2 countries sent delegates over there. One is Russia, so the Russian defense minister Shoigu showed up. Another one is a Politburo member of Chinese Communist Party, a gentleman named Li Hongzhong. He visited over there. And so the optic is very, very clear. You have Kim Jong-un sitting over there at the reviewing stand, and then sandwiched him were a Russian defense minister and a Chinese Politburo member. And the image is terrible. So it shows that China is really, really on the opposite of international goodwill and world peace.
On that note, that dovetails nicely into our last topic, which is just this last week, the Pew Research Center released a new study. 24 countries across the globe were surveyed on how favorable they viewed China's approach to foreign policy. And, just as you're saying, I mean, these results were largely unsurprising. A median of 2/3 of the countries surveyed have an unfavorable opinion of China, whereas only 28% offered positive ratings. The highest unfavorable ratings were in Australia and Japan, with 87% of respondents in each country rating China negatively. And their ratings were lowest in North America, Europe, and Asia, but they were more favorable in Latin America and Africa. Of the 24 countries surveyed, the only countries with a majority of respondents answering favorably were Indonesia, South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and Mexico. Miles, what do you make of this? How does this compare to China's favorability in the past?
Well, you mentioned these countries were more favorable of China, relatively speaking, right? They're still in the 30s or 40% of dislike of China. And as time goes along, all those countries will have a much bigger unfavorability rating of China. Trust me on that. So this actually is a very, very interesting poll, because this is a massive. It's not just the United States poll. It's the 24 countries. China's reputational problem is worldwide. That's a very important point. China always try to say, U.S. is the source of all China's problem. This is total nonsense. If you believe that, you will believe the Great Wall of China is in Papua New Guinea. If you look at the poll very carefully, you realize the several very interesting patterns. Number one, there are some countries that have consistently negative view of China, very, very high. Japan, for example, at some point, a few years ago, 93% of Japanese people have a negative view of China. Germany and France, consistently over the years. So this is very interesting. So it's not just the recent policy or something. But China's recent policy also is a cause of the huge jump of China's bad reputation in these countries, all due to China's own actions, policies. Nobody else's fault. For example, the country with the biggest jump of unfavorable rating of China is Poland. Why? Because China's stance on the war in Ukraine is so notoriously obnoxious to people in Poland. And that's why China has become very unfavorable there in that country. It jumped by 12%, right, from before the war in Ukraine. Canada, in 2019, unfavorable view of China is 45%. It jumped to 67% next year. It's because China unceremoniously and unjustly arrest 2 Canadian citizens, 2 Michaels in China, and treat them with death threat. And that's why 67% of people in Canada have an unfavorable view of China right after that. Sweden, the Swedish country in Europe probably, jumped from 52% to 70% in 2019. And then unfavorable rating in Sweden jumped to 85% in 2020. That's because China kidnapped and hijacked a Swedish citizen, Mr. Gui Minhai, for publishing a biography of Xi Jinping. This is outrageous. So if you look at also the patterns, of course, virtually all countries have the dramatic jump of China's unfavorable rating from 21, 22, 23. It's all due to COVID behavior. China's COVID behavior is just atrocious. And they absolutely refuse international inquiry to the origin of the COVID and say a lot of silly things. And also, last point I don't point out is not all countries are EU or North America or Western in the broadly defined sense. If you look at the chart, the numbers of poll results, the most anti-West, most anti-colonial country is India. India is also, oddly enough, a member of both China-dominated Shanghai Cooperation Organization as well as a BRICS country. Yet 67% of Indians polled dislike China. So this is all very telling, and I think confirm a lot of things that we've been saying on this podcast.